Garrett Crochet just struck out a career-high 13. We'll talk about that and preview Week 13 up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in polka. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Nola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu,
Carlo and Fado, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hit some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on June 14th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers here on a Kokomo Friday. Let's go. Today on the show, Garrett Crochet was amazing. Aaron Nola was not. We have our Week 13 preview and another prospect spotlight. But let's jump in.
You can put it on the board. Yes. Yes.
You know we had to get a little Hawk Harrelson for the White Sox talk. And Chris, that brings me to you, the player of the night.
Yeah, so the player who actually made me say, oh my goodness gracious, was David Robertson, who struck out Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman in a row twice in the last 2 games.
Wow.
Which might be the most impressive thing a relief pitcher can do in Major League Baseball right now. But Garrett Crochet was pretty good. 13 strikeouts in 7 innings, 1 earned run, 2 walks. The Mariners were just overwhelmed, I think is the appropriate word here. Garrett Crochet, nothing fancy. 70% fastballs, 29% cutters, 24 swings and misses on 48 swings. This was just an absolutely absurdly dominant start from Garrett Crochet, and it puts the Seattle Mariners back in the number 1 spot for the highest strikeout rate team of all time. They had dipped just below the 2020 Detroit Tigers before this outing, but 19 strikeouts on 40 plate appearances will get them back to 27.5% strikeout rate as a team. There's a little bit of blame the Mariners, but there's a lot of just Garrett Crochet is freaking amazing. And he's a tough pitcher to value because we don't know how many innings he's going to throw moving forward, but he's really, really good right now. And I don't know how much I want to worry about the possibility of an innings limit, especially because unlike with Luis Heel, I don't know how assured we are that Garrett Crochet's got an innings limit.
I'm pretty certain he does. I mean, no one has come out and said that, but whether the White Sox are looking to protect their player for the future, protect, an asset that they might want to trade at some point, I think it makes sense, especially for a team that isn't competing for anything this season. But again, we don't have any confirmation that is actually the case. And coming off of this start, Scott, career high 13 strikeouts, 24 whiffs on 102 pitches. There is no better time. I don't know that the value will ever be higher this season to sell high on Garrett Crochet. Now, again, we say this all the time, and I need to stress, this has nothing to do with the talent or the performance of Garrett Crochet. To me, this is solely, I do believe that there will be an innings limit at some point. And if you're selling high, make sure you stress the high part, and you have to get something amazing. If not, just keep him.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of with Chris, I think. I think we overstate the innings limit thing. And I probably haven't researched this enough to really back this up, but it just feels like they build in so many innings management things over the course of a season for every pitcher. We're not in a time, it's been a long time since we've been in a time where like the default number of innings is 180. It's not even close to that anymore. It's like 150. And I think most any pitcher, teams feel comfortable asking most any pitcher to go 150 innings these days. So I don't know. I just know we've gotten burned by that multiple times in the past. Like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely not going to get to this innings total, and then he gets to that innings total and exceeds it. And it just happens so often that.
Well, I think the thing with Crochet in particular that makes this different from Yuri Perez or Luis Heel in a current situation is one, we talked about this the other day, but Garrett Crochet is going to have over 4 years of service time after this season, barring something catastrophic, which means that the White Sox or whoever trades for him in the next month or so will only have 2 more seasons of Garrett Crochet's club control remaining.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant difference than when you're talking about 6 more years for Yuri Perez last season, or I think Luis Heel is going to be at 2 years of service time after this season, which means 4 more years after this one. So that is, I think, a different situation. And then there's just Garrett Crochet passed his career high in innings going back to college 2 starts ago. He is already in completely uncharted territory. Maybe he threw more than 84 2/3 innings in high school. I think that's unlikely, but he never threw more than 65 in college. He has not thrown more than 60 or 54 as a professional. So you could make an argument that they should already be ramping him down and limiting his innings if they were working.
But this is like Verducci rule stuff, right?
Yeah, the Verducci rule was you don't want to go more than 50 innings over the previous season.
He's already done that.
Yeah,
he did that. I mean, that's
3 starts
ago.
Something
that a journalist came up with 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know that teams approach it that way anymore.
I mean, teams tend to. You really don't. But, like, it's different for every situation. Like, when Lance Lynn was coming back from Tommy John surgery, this is, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer. But he went over 200 innings in his first year back. And that was after missing a full season. So every situation's different. Every pitcher's different. I think the bigger concern with Garrett Crochet is just he's shown no ability to remain healthy and effective after throwing this many innings. And so will there be a step back? I think it's reasonable to assume that. But I also think it's reasonable to just say, screw it. Unless somebody's going to give me SP2 value for Garrett Crochet, I'm just going to hang on to him and ride it.
Yeah, I mean, how many pitchers on a per start basis, like particularly if you're talking a head-to-head context rather than rotisserie, and you need that impact from week to week, how many pitchers out there can do what Garrett Crochet can? I mean, a dozen, maybe. And none of us even rank him that high, so we're factoring in some amount of we're factoring in some amount of workload management in our ranking with Garrett Crochet. But given that there are so few pitchers who can even do what he does on a week-to-week, start-to-start basis, I think the only scenario that makes sense, particularly given the scarcities in fantasy baseball right now, is if you can trade Garrett Crochet for a hitter who you think is going to be elite the rest of the way. May not even necessarily be a straight up trade, but if you can use Garrett Crochet to get that kind of hitter, that I can see being worth it. But
would you trade him for Ozzie Albies?
Straight up? Yeah, probably. I mean,
would you trade him for Ketel Marte?
Ketel Marte, I could see doing that. Sure. It depends how deep the rest of my pitching staff is.
Royce Lewis.
Oy.
Maybe.
They're
Spencer Steer.
They're kind of the Spider-Man meme, right? Like hitter version. Not that Crochet is, well, I guess he is injury prone, but
yeah, he's thrown like 60 innings as a professional before this season.
I think I would do that. You know what?
Spencer Steer? Or are we still on Royce Lewis?
Royce Lewis,
yeah. I would do it for Royce Lewis. I don't know if I would do it for Spencer.
Steer's getting to the point where it's less automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Really have to weigh needs.
Yeah. When I was saying like sell high on Crochet, I was thinking like top 2 or 3 round player. I don't know that that's realistic, but that
Okay.
is what I'm
Okay.
thinking in my mind. Like, do not
Sure.
sell this guy short by any means. And if you're not going to get that in return, just keep
Yeah.
him. Because obviously we see what he's capable of. A couple
But
other
a top 2 or 3 round player, I'm probably trading any pitcher for that.
Sure. Yeah. No disagreement here. Last 9 starts for Garrett Crochet. It's a 136 ERA, 0.76 whip, 76 strikeouts over 53 innings. He's allowed 28 hits during that span, which is just nuts.
And also only, 10 walks, I think, in that span?
I think it was like 10 or 11 walks. Yeah. His 116 strikeouts total are tied with Tyler Glasnow for most in Major League Baseball. That is Garrett Crochet. Scott, let's go over to you, player of the night.
Oh, we spent so long talking about him. I forget who it was. Remind me who it was.
Taj Bradley.
Taj, my man, Taj Bradley. Yes. Dominant against the Cubs. Struck out 11 over 7 innings, 0 earned runs, 2 unearned runs. Only 3 hits allowed. Dominant. 17 swinging strikes. This gives him now 11.7 K per 9. It gives him a swinging strike rate, I believe, over 14%. So we're getting to the top of the scales in both of those measurements, the top of the scales and just how overpowering Taj Bradley's stuff is after, a few minor league starts on the shorter side, but still a few rehab starts where he would look just as dominant. Like he's looking like a elite bat misser is Taj Bradley. And so I know there's been a certain amount of hand wringing over the exit velocities against him, the quality of contact against him. I don't think it matters that much. That seems like a secondary issue. If you're able to miss bats like an elite pitcher, like that, the exit velocity readings, the amount of hard contact you give up, it only matters to the extent that you're giving up contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that Taj Bradley is going to remain nearly 12 K per 9, but if he's 10 K per 9, it just seems like a footnote that, oh yeah, by the way, his exit velocity is blue on his StatCast page.
Well, that's true to an extent. But
to the when we're talking, should he be rostered?
Right.
He's
That's
still
what I mean.
available
Yeah.
in a third of CBS Sports leagues.
That should you add Taj Bradley? Yes, absolutely, no question about it. Is he a must-start pitcher moving forward? Is a very different question because I don't know if we view Hunter Green as a must-start pitcher, and that's the book on Hunter Green. At least before this season, his quality of contact has been much better this season, but. The issue the past couple of years was, he gets a lot of strikeouts, but the control is not great, and he gives up a lot of home runs, and so the ratios are going to hurt you. And that is, I think, the question with Taj Bradley when you're talking about upside. When you're talking about whether you should add a player, I don't care that much about the downside. I care about the upside, and Taj Bradley clearly has a significant amount of upside.
With Taj Bradley, he is 66% rostered, and the most added pitchers on CBS right now are Jake Irvin, Drew Thorpe, and Hurston Waldrop. I think Taj Bradley goes to the top.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
You good with that, Scott?
Yeah. Yep.
And the thing that's interesting here is last year, his splitter was really good. 41% whiff rate, 188 expected WOBA allowed. He only threw it 14% of the time. Well, that was 25% of the time coming into this start. And then he just threw it 37 times, kind of ditched the curveball and cutter and just went 4-seamer splitter in this one. And, I'm not 100% sure if that's an approach that can work for Taj Bradley, but maybe he just commands those 2 pitches better and can make that approach work for him. Just working, north-south, aim for the center of the zone, let the fastball rise, let the splitter drop, and, he can make that work. Maybe that's the approach that'll unlock something for him. But, yeah, this was an incredibly impressive start for him. And all of the whiffs came on the 4-seamer and splitter. Splitter has been really, really good yet again this season. So, a lot to like about what we're seeing from Taj Bradley.
He pretty much just went with those 2 pitches in this one, kind of ditched the curveball cutter. Not that I think he needs to do that to succeed, but that kind of shows you all that he has to work with, where if he just wanted to strip it down to 2 pitches, he could still dominate like this.
Yeah. And I think the curveball, when I was looking into it, kind of questionable numbers. The cutter was supposed to be his best pitch coming up through the minors, and the numbers on that are still pretty good. So if he has at least 3 reliable pitches he can go to, a 4-seam fastball, a splitter, a cutter, I think things could work out pretty well for Taj Bradley. Whether or not he can command all those pitches from from start to start, that's another question, but he did on Thursday, and he looked amazing against the Cubs. My player of the night is going to be Aaron Nola, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later because I do want to get to our prospect spotlight. A quick note on the, oh my goodness gracious, lineup of the night. 3 nights in a row, we get a double-digit runs scored. The D-backs, they scored 11 runs on 9 hits, 3 homers. Christian Walker, 2 for 5 with a double dong, 4 RBI, and he's just doing the same thing he's done each of the past 2 years. 258 batting average, 15 homers, 42 runs, 46 RBI, 2 steals, and 821 OPS. Christian Walker entered Thursday as the 4th best first baseman in Roto, a top 50 player in that format, and the 6th best first baseman in head-to-head points. The other big performance in this one was Jock Peterson. He went 2 for 4 with his 8th home run, 5 RBI. He's had a fine season. 286 batting average, 887 OPS. The counting stats are a little bit low because he only plays against right-handed pitching. That's what holds Jock Peterson's value. I don't want to say it holds it down because it both helps him because he's really bad against lefties, but it also limits the upside for Peterson. He's 34% rostered. He's got 6 games next week, 3 lefties on the schedule. So I don't think that we can recommend Jock Peterson, at least not for next week.
Nope. But I did recommend him for this week, if you'll recall.
There you go. All right. It's Friday. You know what time it is. It's time for another prospect spotlight. It's time to discuss some of the prospects who are catching our eye from a fantasy perspective, thanks to our sponsors at Hyundai, where they're thinking about every step of your journey out on the road. Let's talk about Rays outfield prospect Chandler Simpson, a 23-year-old, was the 70th overall pick back in 2022. And this season in the minors, a 364 batting average with just 1 homer. But wait for it, 47 steals in 51 games between high A and double A. This comes 1 year after hitting 293 with 94 steals in the minors last season. And earlier in the day, I texted Scott. Originally, we were going to talk about Zach Veen. I want to wait for Zach Veen to get healthy. We'll talk about him on a future podcast. But I texted Scott and I said, which prospect do you want to talk about? He said, Chandler Simpson is kind of interesting, but this doesn't seem like a prospect you'd normally be interested in. So talk to me, Scott. Why Chandler Simpson?
Well, I mean, you read off the numbers there. Extremely high batting average, over 360. The steals, he's on like what would be better than 100 steal pace if they played a full major league amount of games. So, there's those numbers. It is true that I have often questioned, as these prospects have emerged in recent years, Victor Scott being the latest example this year of the kind of slap hitting speedster, not a lot of power profile. Can this player even exist in the modern game? Is there room for this kind of player in the modern game? Because it's been so long since we've seen somebody be this. But I think what separates Chandler Simpson from somebody like Victor Scott, from somebody like Vidal Brujan, from any of the other candidates for that have emerged in recent years and have quickly dissolved, is that more than any of them, Chandler Simpson understands the assignment. He is more like Willie Hayes from the original Major League than from Willie Mays Hayes from the original Major League than the very divisive sequel, by which I mean he is not interested in hitting for power at all. And the ways you can see this are the strikeout rate, very low, just 9% between 2 levels this year. And he hardly ever puts the ball in the air. I don't have the exact number between the two levels because you can't really combine it like that, but it's somewhere around like 25% his fly ball rate, according to Fangraphs, which is very low. So he knows who he is. He knows that he just needs to get on base however he can and then run wild when he gets there. And he's actually doing it with that high batting average. It is, to me, a profile that's reminiscent of Juan Pierre, who was a great fantasy asset for a number of years, more so than like a Billy Hamilton type. Like, just slap your way on base however you need to, have a good batting average, do kind of like a Luis Ariz thing as a hitter, but then show off this blazing speed on the bases. I'm still skeptical that it'll work for Chandler Simpson, just because Juan Pierre, we're talking almost 20 years ago at this point, since he was a thing. But I think if there's any chance of it working, it's somebody who has to be fully committed to it the way Chandler Simpson is.
I want to quote noted therapist Tobias Funke. Didn't want to use a different word. But I'm going to quote him. Lindsay, it's going to be a slant quote. Lindsay, as a fantasy baseball analyst, I have advised a number of people to explore slap hitting speed prospects like Xavier Edwards and Vidal Brujan and Victor Scott over the years. Well, did it work for those people? No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work out for Chandler Simpson. I don't actually believe it's going to work out for Chandler Simpson.
That's rich coming from the biggest Victor Scott fan coming into the year.
I think the thing that often happens with these types of players, and you'll see, like, Chandler Simpson walks a decent amount, 10% walk rates along most of the minor league level, strikeout rates around 10%, 12%. What often happens is as they climb up the ladder and pitchers can actually control their pitches, what tends to happen is these guys just get the bat knocked out of their hands. And you can slap your way to a 340 average at AAA when the defenses are bad and pitchers can't throw their changeups for strikes and all that stuff. Once you get to the majors, you tend to get solved pretty quickly. And like Luis Ariz is a 1 in 1,000 type of player. And so I'm very skeptical of this profile. And with Victor Scott,
I agree.
One of the things I tended to like about him was there was a little bit more non-slap to his game. Like, he wasn't running up, 112 mile per hour average exit velocities or anything, but like, he wasn't, who's a good comp? Like, in the minors, he was doing 86 mile per hour exit velocities rather than Victor Robles, who was at like 83 miles per hour. That's my concern, is that it didn't work out for Victor Scott. Maybe there's a bigger hole in his swing, or he just doesn't have, as good contact skills, but it's a profile I tend to be very, very skeptical of.
Agree.
All right. Chandler Simpson was one of 12 hitters Scott wrote about in his latest prospect report. Make sure to check out that article, which is live on the site, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. Thanks again to Hyundai for sponsoring this segment and the show. Learn more at HyundaiUSA.com. Quick reminder to download and follow Fantasy Baseball Today in 5 wherever you listen to podcasts. That's our 5-minute podcast. We have a bonus prospect episode coming out every Saturday of the season. Let's take our first break, and when we return, we'll hit the news and notes right after this.
There's some new players in town, and they brought the plague.
You got my attention. You don't want that. What happened to Kingstown?
Mayor of Kingstown. New season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. Let's talk news and notes. Corey Seager was scratched from the lineup Thursday after experiencing tightness in his hamstring. Again, Bruce Bochy said Seager is likely to be back in the lineup on Friday. Right. Trey Turner progressed to running at 100% on Thursday and could be back early next week. Juan Soto has started 3 games in a row in right field, so it looks like we're in the clear for now. Cross your fingers. Hope everything's all right there with the forearm. Edwin Diaz was reinstated by the Mets on Thursday and wasted no time. He pitched a scoreless ninth inning and wound up with the win. Wilson Contreras is hoping to begin a rehab assignment around June 18th. He's just 5 weeks into a projected 10-week timetable following surgery to repair a fractured left forearm. Clayton Kershaw threw a 3-inning simulated game on Thursday and should head out on a rehab assignment at some point next week. Kodai Senga said his bullpen Wednesday went well. He's expected to have 2 more before facing hitters. Nolan Arenado left Thursday's game after getting hit by a pitch in his hand. X-rays came back negative, and Arenado is considered day-to-day. Randy Arozarena returned to the lineup after missing 2 games with right hamstring tightness. Taylor Ward and Logan O'Hoppe were both in the lineup Thursday after missing 1 game each. Ward with back tightness. O'Hoppe got hit in the groin with a foul tip. Hope he's all right. Jorge Polanco ran the bases before Thursday's game and then went out on a rehab assignment. He's been on the IL since May 26th with a hamstring injury. Ty France has a good chance of returning from the IL when first eligible Tuesday or very shortly thereafter. Tommy Pham will be activated from the IL on Friday. Eloy Jimenez began a rehab assignment in the Arizona Complex League on Thursday, and Alex Kirilloff was optioned to AAA. Austin Martin was recalled by the Twins. Let's talk waiver wire pitchers, and Taj Bradley was the top name from Thursday. A couple others who stood out. Brandon Pfaadt, a strong start against the Angels. 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts, had 14 whiffs on 103 pitches. His velocity was up between 1 and 1.3 miles per hour on each of his main pitches. Michael Lorenzen turned in a strong start at the Dodgers. 7 innings, 1 run, 2 strikeouts, had 11 whiffs on 95 pitches, and leaned mostly on his four-seam fastball, changeup, and cutter. That looks like a recipe for success. Those are probably his 3 best pitches. He throws, I don't know, usually like 6 or 7, but those are the best ones, and it obviously worked here. And Alec Marsh had the Yankees completely fooled. Aaron Judge struck out 4 times on Thursday, and Marsh was a big reason for that. He looked really good. He threw 7 shutout innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, had 12 whiffs on 96 pitches. Previous 3 starts before this were really bad. This one was really good. Chris, any interest in Marsh, Lorenzen, and Brandon Pfaadt?
I think they're all pretty fringy in terms of the talent. If I had to rank them, I'd probably go Pfaadt, Lorenzen, and Marsh. I just don't think there's very much strikeout upside for Marsh. I know he looked good in this one, but Lorenzen, we know, he's been around long enough. We saw something similar to this last season. He was really good for really the first 4 months of the season for the most part. And then he fell apart and turned back into the, just the overall numbers ended up being just decent. 4.18 ERA. That's more or less what I expect from him. He doesn't get a ton of strikeouts either. At least Pfaadt you can count on for close to a strikeout per inning moving forward, maybe a little bit more if that sweeper starts playing up. And he has taken a big step forward in terms of the quality of contact that he's allowing, which has allowed a 3.06 xERA entering this start. That was a big problem for him last year. Brandon Pfaadt just got absolutely crushed, gave up a ton of home runs between the majors and his little playoff run. If he can be more of a strikeout per inning, maybe a 9.5 K per 9 guy, and be a decent quality of contact guy, I think Pfaadt can be somewhat useful. He's got the Nationals next week. I think he's a decent streamer there.
Yeah, I think Pfaadt's pretty good. He's been one of the biggest underachievers in terms of the ERA estimators. 3.40. So he's got a 4.38 ERA now, but he has a 3.41 FIP, a 3.56 xFIP, and an xERA. It's not updated with today, but it's in the low 3s. It's the best of all of them, and obviously has a great offense backing him in Arizona. So I think Pfaadt needs to be more rostered than he is. I'm not totally dismissive of Marsh either. He is kind of not who I expected him to be coming into the year. He's doing a bit of the same thing Seth Lugo's doing. It's only 6 pitches instead of 8. But he's throwing a lot of pitches with a pretty balanced distribution between those pitches. And he mixed it up a lot against the Yankees. He said that was his intention. He was trying to keep them off balance and just get ahead in the count. He was trying to throw things that he didn't normally throw in the counts, where like he was just trying to use all those options to his advantage to keep the Yankees guessing, basically. And he managed to shut down that lineup with that approach. And we've seen a lot of pitchers who we thought were lacking in pure talent have a lot of success with that approach, especially this year. And so while I don't think Alec Marsh needs to be universally rostered or everything, spoiler alert, he's a sleeper pitcher for next week facing the Athletics. And he's only 37% rostered now. He's widely available and probably doesn't need to be quite that available.
Mm-hmm. I do agree with what you guys had to say about Brandon Pfaadt. I think he's a little bit under rostered as well. He is right at 73%. Any higher, we're talking about like a must roster pitcher, but those underlying numbers do look good. The strikeout to walk rate, very good for Brandon Pfaadt. I have this trio in my ranking 66, 67, 68 at starting pitcher. Taj Bradley, Matt Waldron, and Brandon Pfaadt. Those are, I would say, over the past couple of weeks, the most enticing pitchers that have come off the waiver wire, and they probably should not be on the waiver wire anymore. What the heck happened to Aaron Nola? He got crushed at the Red Sox. 3 2/3 innings, 11 hits, 8 runs allowed, only 3 strikeouts, only 6 swinging strikes on 90 pitches. He allowed 9 hard hits in this start, 91.9 average exit velocity. The velocity was actually up quite a bit on all of his pitches across the board. What's confusing with Aaron Nola is the fact that he has a really good curveball. It kind of feels like he should just throw his curveball more. He mixes in this changeup and cutter. They're just not good pitches. They have not been good pitches this year. The changeup has been good at times. I don't know why pitchers insist on throwing pitches that, at least statistically, from what we could see, they just don't look like good pitches. But I don't know. That was just like a random thing that came to my mind for Nola. Obviously, he was awesome in his previous 5 starts before this one. Chris, anything that actually stood out worrisome here for Aaron Nola?
No, I don't think so. It's been interesting that he's been as effective as he has been this season with his velocity down, almost a mile per hour. And then his velocity's back up in this one, up 1.2 miles per hour on the sinker, 1.4 on the curveball. And it's his worst start of the season. So I don't know quite what to make of that. I don't know if there's an overthrowing issue and he loses command when he's throwing a little harder. I don't really know, but his
command was considered to be the problem last year. That's what he took steps toward improving come postseason time, because he was just leaving too many fastballs over the plate. And it's not a good fastball for him to do that. He has to paint the corners. So there may be something to what you're saying. Obviously, we're just theorizing here. But it could be that he's better off taking something a little off because he's able to spot it better.
Now, the other thing is the whiff rates are way down on pretty much everything except for the fastballs so far this season, especially on those changeups and cutters that you mentioned, Frank. He had a 15% whiff rate with the changeup, 14% with the cutter coming into the start. Both were over 30% last season. So if he can't get those back, he should probably scrap those pitches, because in the past they've been decent quality of contact pitches, but not enough to justify if they're going to not get whiffs like that. But that's never really been a problem before. They were above 30% whiff rates in 2023. They were right at 28 and 29% in 2022. So I do expect those pitches to perform better moving forward. And, Nola, what's he at? Like a 3.4 ERA now?
He is right at 3.48.
That, maybe a little lower than that I would expect moving forward, but that's probably where he should be. So I don't know if I'm concerned about anything we saw today.
Yeah, the changeup and cutter, I mean, I get that you have to probably throw them more to up those numbers and up the whiff rates and figure something out. But I don't know. As long as they're not performing, maybe just put them on ice a little bit and lean into other things that are working. But just something weird that stood out to me from Aaron Nola. Garrett Crochet was not the only reliever turned starter who pitched really well again on Thursday. Reynaldo Lopez continues to dominate. He was at the Orioles. He threw 6 shutout innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, had 18 whiffs on 91 pitches. 9 of those came on the fastball. And interestingly enough, he actually cut his slider usage in half in this start, and he used more curves and changeups. The slider is pretty much his best pitch. It's the bread and butter here for Reynaldo Lopez, and he still managed to have a really, really dominant start. His 1.69 ERA, if I saw this correctly earlier, I believe it now leads all of baseball in ERA, which is
that sounds right. Yeah,
which is pretty crazy stuff for Reynaldo Lopez. Scott, do you think we're too low in the rankings on Lopez? I don't know. He leads baseball in ERA. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I've wrestled with it. He hasn't gotten as much attention as other major ERA overachievers like Ranger Suarez and Seth Lugo. So I've been slower in moving him up, but he's a better strikeout pitcher than Seth Lugo anyway. I guess the rate's pretty similar to Ranger Suarez. And in theory, he has a good offense backing him, though it hasn't played like that so far this year. He's gotten a lot of wins. No, he hasn't gotten a lot of wins, has he? I'm thinking of Chris Sale. He hasn't gotten a lot of wins. Forget that part.
Yeah, this was his 4th, right?
I actually saw an interview with Alex Anthopoulos during the start. I was watching this game, and he said, we weren't expecting this. We were thinking, he actually gave a number. We were expecting a mid to high 3s ERA from Reynaldo Lopez. And, obviously they probably weren't thinking the offensive environment would be what it is this year. And that probably has had some effect on it. But, Reynaldo Lopez, pretty good strikeout rate, a really good swinging strike rate. And what I've noticed since I watch a lot of Braves games, I've seen him a lot. And I'm hesitant to put much stock in my observations. A lot of people think, oh, well, the most valuable opinion comes from watching a game, but I feel like it's just the opposite. I feel like the numbers don't lie, right? I trust the numbers more than what I'm observing when I'm watching somebody play. But what I've observed with Reynaldo Lopez is that his command is exceptional. He is incredible at spotting the ball on the corners, on the edges, out of the heart of the plate. And I think that's been a key to his success. Does that mean he can sustain a sub-2 or even sub-3 ERA? I sincerely doubt it. But is he going to be somebody who's worth using in fantasy all season long? I'm definitely leaning yes to that on that by now.
So the thing with Lopez and with Seth Lugo and Michael Lorenzen, although they're not all on the same level, but just as examples of this type, is it's been happening for 2.5 months now. And the comments that I'll see are, it keeps happening and it's been 2.5 months. And at some point you have to stop being skeptical. This is what people will tell us when we rank these guys low. And I'm lower on Lugo. I would assume I'm lower on Lopez than you guys are as well. And the thing I always need to stress is, while 2 months feels like a long time in the process of it happening, it isn't. Like, in the grand scheme of understanding who baseball players are, 2 months is a really small sample size. A month is smaller, roughly half of 2 months, but 2 months just isn't as much as it feels like. And to prove that point, here is who was leading the majors in ERA at this point last year. Eduardo Rodriguez, a fine pitcher, had a 4.24 ERA the rest of the way. That was probably roughly average. I think Reynaldo Lopez can be a little better than average moving forward.
Probably exactly what Alex Anthopoulos thought he would be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Probably,
his xERA entering today was 3.85. He's got an above average strikeout rate, an above average walk rate, and below average quality of contact so far. I think you add it all up and it's a fine pitcher. Use him while he's hot, by all means. If we set the ERA over under at 3.75 the rest of the way, I think I'd take the over, but I think it'll be close. Like
that's
he's useful.
That's a really
it kind of depends how much the offensive environment normalizes, because I hear 375 and I think what a 375 ERA was last year versus the very bad number that the 375 ERA is this year.
Sure, maybe it's a 3.6 ERA, like whatever, like a 55th or 60th percentile mark among starters would be.
Yeah,
I think he will be better than average, and this also goes for Seth Lugo. Like I think they will be useful. I don't think we have to look at Reynaldo Lopez and Seth Lugo and other guys like that and say, well, they've got sub 2 ERAs for 2.5 months. They have to be stars now. I don't. Yeah.
Right. And I've used the Bryce Elder example from last
Bryce
year
Elder's
too.
a very good. John Gray was like a top 7 starter in ERA early on last year.
I do think Reynaldo Lopez is succeeding in a more conventional way than Bryce Elder was, because he has more than a strikeout per inning. He has the 12% swinging strike rate, but no, he's not going to lead the majors in ERA.
And the other point that's worth making, specifically with Reynaldo Lopez, he is RP eligible in head-to-head points leagues. So all the stuff about he's useful but not special, that might not apply in a head-to-head points league. He might just be a must-start guy in a head-to-head points league because he's an RP.
All right, let's quickly talk some waiver wire hitters before we get to our Week 13 preview. And JD Martinez walked it off for the Mets. He went 2 for 4 with a double and his 6th home run, added 2 RBI. He's batting .271 with 6 homers, a .785 OPS. Has done a better job recently lowering the strikeout rate. It's down to 28%. Last year, it was 31%. For most of the season, it was up over 30%. So looks like he's made an effort to lower the strikeout rate and still remains just 65% roster. Do you guys think JD Martinez just has to be like closer to 100% must roster hitter at this point?
There are a lot of teams that I have with like Vladimir Guerrero in the utility spot or Shohei Ohtani in the utility spot, where I look at a utility only player on the waiver wire and I'm just like, there's no point. So that's the thing that's tough. If you've got a hole at utility, sure, but it's hard to look at a player who's utility only and say they are must roster unless they are an absolute star. And I don't think JD Martinez is that.
He could become that. I mean, obviously he was last year. He has been for most of the last 7-8 years, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, at this point, you're talking how shallower lineup leagues, head-to-head leagues. 65% is probably about right, because I don't think he's at a point where you can start him in those shallower leagues yet. And if you can't start him, then it's hard to justify keeping him around. In that sort of context, he should be rostered in every roto league, but with a 65% roster rate, I imagine he is.
All right, 2 corner infielders coming around lately. Jake Berger went 1 for 3 with his 6th home run. Last 16 games, he's batting .328 with 3 homers, 11 runs scored, 93.5 average exit velocity, 59% rostered is Jake Berger. And Andrew Vaughn went 2 for 5 with his 8th home run. Last 16 games, batting .323, 5 homers, 12 runs, 92.6 average exit velocity. Scott, are you buying into either one of these corner infielders slowly coming around?
Well, to a degree. I mean, I like Jake Berger a lot coming in. I will point out that during this 16-game stretch where the hitting has improved, he's still striking out 29% of the time, very high rate. And so we're not seeing the strikeout improvement that we saw after he joined the Marlins last year. Even during his hottest stretch of the season, we're not seeing that. And so particularly in a more punishing offensive environment for hitters, I think he's going to have a hard time moving the needle with that kind of strikeout rate. So I am encouraged to a degree, but I'm not rushing out to pick up Jake Berger in every league where he was dropped or anything like that. Vaughn, Yeah, it's better numbers. It's better numbers over a similar stretch of time, 16 games. It's going to take a lot more than that to convince me that this is finally the breakthrough for Andrew Vaughn. And obviously, he doesn't have a lot of help around him in that White Sox lineup. So I think if you want to pick him up as a hot hand play, I wouldn't object to it too much. Obviously, there's a need for hot hand plays with so few trustworthy starters in the hitting ranks right now. But I'm not sold on Andrew Vaughn being like this sudden breakout or anything. I need to see a lot more.
Would you drop either Anthony Rizzo or Justin Turner to add Berger or Andrew Vaughn?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'd miss them that much. So if you want to pick up, if you'd rather start Vaughn right now with the way he's hitting, let me check his matchups next week. Matchups aren't great, but it's not like I particularly want to start Justin Turner. Who was the other one you mentioned? Anthony Rizzo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have faith in any of these four hitters we're talking about. If I'm being perfectly honest with the way offense is going across the league, I don't have faith in Berger, Rizzo, Turner, or Vaughn being like somebody you're just going to plug into your lineup and leave him there and feel great about it the rest of the way. It's kind of whoever is showing me that they're worth starting. When you get to that level of the hitter ranks, I don't trust, like, that's not a caliber of hitter that I say, yes, for sure. He has the track record. He's going to come through. I can't say that for any of those guys. So Vaughn's the hottest right now. If you want to start him over the other three, that's fine with me.
Last two names in deeper leagues. Justin Henry Malloy had himself a nice game, 2 for 3 with a double and his second home run. It was 107.9 exit velocity, 407 feet. And Justin Henry Malloy has started 8 of 9 games for the Tigers since being recalled. Lower batting average so far, but 367 on base percentage, hitting the ball hard, pulling the ball. I think there could be something there. So any leagues with corner infielders, we were just talking about hot hand approaches. Justin Henry Malloy might turn out to be one of those. And Tyler Soderstrom has turned up the power this week, 1 for 4 with his 4th home run, his 3rd homer in the past 4 games. And you might be looking for a catcher replacement, if you lost JT Realmuto. And so I think Soderstrom could be a fine second catcher.
CBS, one of the few platforms where Soderstrom is catcher eligible. You have Uncle Scott to thank for that.
Thank you, Uncle Scott.
There is an objective standard behind it, and I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it wasn't just willy-nilly. I gave Soderstrom catcher eligibility, but yeah. I will point out, not saying Soderstrom is a must-add catcher yet, but he started 8 straight at first base, 8 straight games though, 14% K rate during that 8-game stretch versus his 32% rate on the season. So obviously inexperienced guy, we could see him start to find more comfort at the plate at the major league level. Maybe we could see that strikeout rate come down permanently. If that happens for Tyler Soderstrom, then we may be on to something.
All right, let's take our final break. And when we return, we will get into the Week 13 preview right after this.
An unsub, a seasoned one. And he's leaving a calling card.
How do we find a ghost? I have a plan.
Welcome back in. Let's preview Week 13, the schedule for next week. 3 teams have 7 games, the Rockies, Brewers, and Padres. 26 teams have 6 games, and 1 unlucky team has 5 games, the Angels. What about the Rockies? I just mentioned they have 7 games next week. All of them are at home. Yes, 4 against the Dodgers and 3 against the Nationals. Starters sit these fringe 2-start pitchers, and we'll alternate. We'll go Scott and Chris. And, Chris, you've been around for this before. It's, you either say they're good to start in all leagues, head-to-head points only, or avoid.
That's complicated, but I think I can figure it out.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. First up is John Gray. He is facing the Mets and the Royals. The problem with John Gray, he only threw 3 innings in his last outing. Chris, what do you think on John Gray?
I'd probably prefer only head-to-head points, but I think that would be my answer for most of these guys, and that's going to be boring. So, yeah.
Okay. Javier Assad is up against the Giants and the Mets. What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, that's definitely a points league one for me. Probably
RP.
worth doing since he's RP eligible, and that's where that matters most, the points format. But don't see much use in him in roto leagues or categories leagues at this point.
Chris, it might be the same exact answer for Jordan Hicks, who is at the Cubs and at the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Jordan Hicks is the results for the most part have been very good this season, and you would assume a pitcher gets like 4 2-start weeks a year, and those might be the only 4 times that Jordan Hicks throws more than 5 1/3 innings in a week. So yeah, I'd start him in most formats, I would say.
All right, Scott, your boy Reese Olson is at the Braves and home against the White Sox. 2
Yeah, great matchups.
best matchups in baseball.
You know, that's true. And I was trying to think in the terms of the Braves being a good matchup. It didn't work out so well for Cole Irvin here on Thursday, for what it's worth. But yeah, if I was viewing that just reflexively as one really bad matchup, one really good matchup, I probably need to move Reese Olson up in the 2-start pitcher rankings. Probably still just a points league situation with the way his last couple turns have gone, but I had him in the no thanks section originally. So yeah, I'm going to bump him up a little. Maybe put him in the sleeper pitchers for this week, recognizing that the Braves are a pretty good matchup, pretty favorable matchup for pitchers right now.
Chris, can I interest you in Aaron Savali at the Twins and at the Pirates, or is that a no thanks?
Yeah, I mean, the joke I made about Jordan Hicks only throwing 6 innings in a 2-start week kind of also applies to Aaron Savali, who hasn't done that since April 16th after doing it 3 times in his first 5 starts. That's a points only one for me. I do not trust Aaron Savali, despite a good start today.
And then a whole bunch of stayaways. There are lots of 2-star pitchers next week. It looks like a large majority of them are bad. Let's talk about some 2-star pitchers that are pretty good. Ones that you might want to add in stream. Scott, over to you.
All right. Well, not as many this week. Did you just say there was a lot? You're wrong. There's not many at all.
2-star pitchers?
Yeah.
It seemed like there were so many.
No, there's 3, and the 3 on here.
Oh,
Okay,
no. I just meant 2-star pitchers in general. There's a lot of 2-star pitchers, but a lot of them are bad.
There's 31. Anyway,
It seems like a lot.
Jake Irvin is my favorite, but his matchups are against the Diamondbacks and at the Rockies. So that's where we're starting here. And that's actually the case for a lot of the good but not great pitchers who are in line for 2 starts. They're just bad matchups. So that goes for Michael King, it goes for Yusei Kikuchi, it goes for Christopher Sanchez, that goes for Jake Irvin. You're probably starting them all with 2 starts, even if the matchups are bad, just because Chris said. I kind of was trying to do the math in my head real quick. Is it really only 4 2-star weeks a pitcher gets during the season? And that's probably about right. I mean, I imagine some might get closer to 6, but not many more than that. So yeah, gotta put them out there for the 2-star week. If we think Jake Irvin's good, and we said after his last start that we do. Okay, Braxton Garrett has better matchups. He gets the Cardinals and the Mariners. Unfortunately, he's been awful lately, and I'm a little skeptical of the upside anyway. Slider hasn't been playing as well this year, but those matchups are really good. So I think in points leagues anyway, you could go with Braxton Garrett. And finally, Tristan McKenzie, definitely just a points league play with as bad as his control is. But 2 great matchups, Mariners and Blue Jays. And we already mentioned him, but I guess I have to add Reese Olson to this list with the Braves and White Sox. I think I'd rather start Reese Olson than Tristan McKenzie, right?
I think so. I think so. Chris, what do you think?
Reese Olson versus Tristan McKenzie. I would go with Reese Olson.
Yeah. What about Javier Assad versus Reese Olson? Just having you guys do the rankings for me here.
I think I would go with Assad.
I don't know how you account for RP eligibility there. If that doesn't matter, I think I'd go Olsen, but in a points league, I'd start Assad.
Okay. All right.
What about the single start streamers? You have a lot more names on this list.
Yeah, because I got to fill 10 spots and I only had 3 2-star pitchers on there. Okay. So Hunter Brown's been great and he gets the White Sox. Pretty easy there. Taj Bradley, middle of the road matchup against the Twins, but after what he just did to the Cubs, I think we all feel good about that. Kyle Gibson, been very solid, and he gets the Marlins this week. Brandon Pfaadt, coming off a great start here Thursday, gets the Nationals. It's a pretty good matchup. Chris Paddock was great last time, and he gets Oakland. Alec Marsh coming off this great start Thursday. Oakland is his next matchup. And finally, Drew Thorpe here at Detroit. Detroit's actually climbed the offensive ranks a little bit. They've outscored the Braves now for the season.
Wow.
But I think they're still in the lower third in runs scored. They're 18th. I don't believe they'll stay 18th. I still think they're a pretty good matchup there for Drew Thorpe. So he's on the list as well.
I would agree with that. Chris, of these single start streamers, who is your favorite rest of season, not just for next week?
Oh, rest of season is probably Taj Bradley, but I am starting to talk myself into Hunter Brown. He also has a really good matchup this weekend against Detroit, although, they're no longer bottom third in runs scored. I don't know if you guys heard.
No.
But yeah, he's been really solid basically since the start of May.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk hitters. The best matchups for next week: the Dodgers, the Nationals, Rockies, Cardinals, and Brewers. The worst hitter matchups: Astros, Rays, Guardians, Angels, and Marlins. With that being said, oh yeah, I see his name, Jesse Winker, per my recommendation yesterday. Scott put him on the list. I'm just kidding. Who are your sleeper hitters, Scott, for week 13?
Did you go through the number of games every team has? Because it's a pretty interesting slate this week.
Did up top. Yeah, it was 3
So only 3 teams have 7 games, and the Rockies are one of them, all 7 being at home. And only one team has 5 games. That's the Angels. You mentioned they have the 4th worst matchups. Okay, so sleeper hitters, with the Nationals having the best matchups, they're one of the 2 teams visiting the Rockies in Colorado. Jesse Winker's on here. Because it's only one left-hander on the schedule, Luis Garcia is also on here. I also have Jacob Young on here just because, get as many Nationals as they can on here with as favorable as those matchups are. He could steal you a lot of bases. So 3 Nationals on the list. Top of the list is actually Joseph Ortiz, with the Brewers being one of the 3 teams playing 7 games and only one lefty on the schedule. Ortiz numbers are especially good against right-handers, if you can believe it. But he is dealing with a hamstring injury right now. It's not expected to put him on the IL, but if he doesn't return over the weekend, then obviously can't trust Ortiz as a sleeper hitter. But I'm assuming he will. That's why he's at the top of the list. Andy Pages is on this list as well. I know we might be suffering from some Andy Pages fatigue, because he's been on this list so often and hasn't always lived up to it, though he did homer Thursday. So maybe, he's actually got pretty good numbers in June. So I think he's coming around again. And the Dodgers have the very best matchups. They are the other team visiting the Rockies this week and for 4 games. So count on Pages to take advantage of that. You mentioned the Cardinals have the 4th best matchups. I like Alec Burleson to take advantage of that. The Twins did not quite crack the list of best matchups here, but they weren't far off. I think Willie Castro, who is one of the most consistently in the lineup for them, and is eligible at 4 different positions, something like that. I think 4 different positions.
4.
Not first base. And but if you do have first base, his teammate, Carlos Santana, who's been hot here in June, he can also take advantage of those matchups. And then the really deep play for this week is Spencer Horwitz. The Blue Jays don't face a single left-hander, so I think we can trust him to start every game. And he's been batting leadoff when he's been in the lineup. He's been getting hits consistently. Not a big power guy, but I think could be useful in a week like this where you can count on him to play every day.
All right. Did want to quickly note, you mentioned Andy Pajes, what he's done in June. Some people might say, oh, well, he was slumping before that. He did have a rough May, but in 11 June games, Pajes batting .378 with 2 homers and a .1057 OPS. So I agree, Scott. I sign off on your Andy Pajes recommendation for next week. Let's wrap up with some leftovers, and we will first start with some pitchers. Part 1, Joe Ryan, quality start against Oakland, 7 innings, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, had 14 whiffs on 95 pitches. Justin Steele was awesome at Tampa Bay, 6 shutout, 5 strikeouts, had 13 whiffs on 93 pitches. Last 4 starts for Steele. It's a .72 ERA and a 1 whip on the nose. Tanner Houck turned in a quality start against the Phillies. 6 innings, 3 runs, 5 strikeouts. He now leads all of baseball with 12 quality starts this season. Chris, anything on Houck, Steele, and Joe Ryan?
No, I think these guys are all pretty much awesome.
If I could say something on Justin Steele here real quick, because I feel like the vibes have been bad. Last year, Justin Steele had a 3.06 ERA, 117 whip, 9.1 K per 9. Obvious Cy Young contender. Can't say anything bad about him without getting torches and pitchforks at your door. This year, Justin Steele, 3.22 ERA, 109 whip, 8.6 K per 9. Cue Pam from The Office meme. It's the same picture.
The thing is, if you're going to pitch well and then poorly, or poorly and then well, it's much better for your Q rating if you pitch well early. That establishes in people's brains that you're pitching well. Mm-hmm. And then if you pitch poorly for a month, it's like, who cares? His ERA is 3.22. But if you pitch poorly at the start and then pitch well, it's like, yeah. That's the distinction there.
I did have a tweet about Justin Steele's last 4 starts, and one of the responses I got, Scott will still say he's garbage.
I mean, wow. Not like I wasn't drafting him in almost every league this year.
Yeah, there was an emoji involved, so I think the guy was kidding, but it's still it's still funny that people know you as that Justin Steele.
Well, I saw a comment here in the comment stream, like, because I was hyping up Taj Bradley for his strikeouts, and it was like, old Scott, who hated strikeouts, would have never said this. And I was like, when did I ever hate strikeouts?
You've always hated strikeouts. We all know it, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, you gave out the recommendation of the Golden Girls last year, which
was
famously did not get many strikeouts. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know that was labeling me the anti-strikeout guy. I thought I was touting these guys. They were slipping through the cracks because they didn't get whatever. It's just dumb comments.
Yeah, let's get into some quick hitting leftovers. Paul Goldschmidt quietly coming around. 1 for 4 with his 8th home run. Last 28 games, Goldschmidt is batting .270 with 6 homers, 17 runs, 16 RBI, and 2 steals. That's a 32 home run pace over 150 games. It's probably close to what we were expecting from Paul Goldschmidt. Chris, I don't think that he's fully back, but over the last month, he's looked a lot like Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, I think it's fair to assume that he's not going to get quite to where he was last year, certainly not where he was a couple of years ago, but players usually aren't as bad as they look at their worst moments, and that's probably true of Paul Goldschmidt. The cats are eating now.
Time to eat.
His strikeout rate is still pretty elevated during this good stretch.
Yeah.
I will note.
It's 26% last 28 games, and last year it was around 23%. So
it was still, 26. It was exactly 26% in the second half. So he's kind of, I don't know that he's getting that back at his age.
Yeah. Other hitting leftovers, Ozzie Albies turned in the first 4-game hit of the season, 4 for 5 with 2 doubles and 2 runs scored. Yandy Diaz has multiple hits in 5 of his past 6 games. He's hitting for batting average in June. That's not the problem. He still only has 4 home runs on the season. That is the problem. Tyler O'Neill, 2 for 5 with his 12th home run. That came off of Aaron Nola. Carlos Correa has really enjoyed facing the A's, 3 for 4 with his 6th home run, 2 runs, 3 RBI, just a huge series for him. Luis Robert is basically just hitting home runs and nothing else. He has 6 hits since coming off the IL. 5 of those are homers. Wyatt Langford is running a little bit since returning. He went 2 for 4 with 2 RBI and 2 steals in 13 games since coming off the IL. 271 batting average, 1 double, 2 triples, 3 steals. Still looking for his first home run over the fence. He has 1 homer this year. It was an inside the park home run. Just a weird season. It's a rookie, whatever. Wyatt Langford. And Jazz Chisholm had himself a game, 2 for 4 with a sock and a shoe. His 10th home run, his 13th steal. Anything to add here? Lots of, I guess, kind of interesting names. Anyone stand up?
I feel like the vibes have been bad. I don't know why I keep using that expression, but I feel like they've been bad for Jazz Chisholm as well. And I'm not.
Scott's a big vibes guy.
I feel like Jazz Chisholm is just doing. Like, we should all be happy with what Jazz Chisholm's doing, because he is one early round hitter who's actually done exactly what he's supposed to do, hitting his usual 254 batting average, 25 homer, 30 steal pace. I think the run and RBI pace sucks because he's in the Marlins lineup. But, as long as he's healthy, he's obviously must start, borderline the lead outfielder, I would say.
I will say, yeah, he's a top 20 outfielder for me in Roto especially. I will say I'm not certain how long he's going to be held back by the Marlins lineup. I don't know if his name has come up in any trade rumors, but it feels like the Marlins should probably try to trade him. And I would guess, if what we know about this front office coming from the Rays seems like a guy they'd want to try to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my feel for things.
Yeah, I mean, if we're hearing rumors that the White Sox are listening on Luis Robert, why wouldn't the Marlins listen on Jazz, right? It's not the craziest thing if those teams are just going into full-on rebuilds. Like,
maybe they can get Zach Gallen from
They
him.
can listen on Jazz while they're listening to Jazz.
Do I have? No, I don't have the. Sometimes I have that saxophone loaded up in the soundboard. I don't have it ready to go though. Some bullpen updates for the Braves. Raisel Iglesias allowed a hit, but picked up his 17th save. For the Yankees, Clay Holmes got the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up 2 runs on 3 hits, took his 4th blown save and 2nd loss. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley was unavailable. It was Andrew Kittredge who picked up his 1st save. For Tampa Bay, Pete Fairbanks walked 1, but picked up his 9th save. For the Marlins, Tanner Scott got the 9th inning with a 1-run lead. He gave up a walk-off 2-run homer to JD Martinez. For the White Sox, Michael Kopech entered the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up a game-tying home run to Julio Rodriguez. He took his 4th blown save. The White Sox took the lead in the 10th, and then lefty Tanner Banks struck out 2 for his 2nd save. And in the Rangers game, Kirby Yates picked up his 10th save of the season. He struck out 3 and walked 1. Just
in the original Mission Impossible movie, wasn't there a bad guy named Kittredge? I just the way you said Kittredge, it just took me back, and I had this visual of Tom Cruise yelling Kittredge. Am I making that up?
I
Do you guys
think
remember?
Eugene Kittredge has been in multiple Missions Impossible.
Oh, really?
He was in Dead Reckoning, the one that came out last summer as well.
I think I only saw the first 2 is the thing.
Like, they've gotten better. They're very good movies.
Do you guys think I have seen Mission Impossible? Trick question?
You haven't seen Mission Impossible. Impossible.
Adam Sandler's not in it, so probably not.
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a single.
They're good movies, man. Good movies.
Yeah, but
Tom Cruise drives a motorcycle off a cliff.
Are they much better than watching the same Adam Sandler movie 10 more times? I don't know.
It's close.
All right, let's do to stream or not to stream for Friday. And I think yesterday we said Kyle Gibson, Hunter Brown, and Simeon
Woods Richardson. Yeah.
There's also Tyler Anderson at the Giants.
It's kind of going sideways lately.
Yeah.
I would stick with the first 3 you said.
All right. On Saturday, what do we have here? Anybody fun? Not really. I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I'll throw out Patrick Sandoval at the Giants.
Yeah.
Throw him out. That's the proper phrasing.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I don't really like anybody from Saturday. I mean, Like Andrew Abbott keeps doing it, but I don't.
Not again.
believe
I'm
in
not
it
going to do
at
that against
all.
Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Like
the thing with Andrew Abbott is the xERA is actually quite good, which is shocking, and I don't buy it, but it is happening.
Weird coincidence. Adam Mazier will be pitching in New York this weekend.
Wow, maybe him and Adam Mazier can meet up.
Adam Mazier and Adam Mazier in the same building. It could happen. I don't want to start anybody from Saturday either, but because it's not helpful to people to name nobody, I'm going to throw a wild card at you. Andre Payante against the Cubs.
All right.
Ground ball pitcher.
I was going to say, load up those ground balls. You're getting a ton of them. What about on Sunday? Miles Michaelis is pitching quite well lately. That's fine. There's Mitchell Parker against the Marlins.
That's also fine.
That's really good. That's the best one of the weekend, Mitchell Parker.
You know, there's lots of interesting names. I'll just throw them out there. You tell me your favorites. Hurston Waldrop against the Rays. Tyler McGill against the Padres. Spencer Arrighetti has pitched well recently. He's facing the Tigers. Chris Paddock against Oakland. Drew Thorpe at Arizona.
Yeah, I think there's 5 or 6 that are worth considering. I think I probably like all those guys more than anyone from Saturday.
Dane Dunning facing the team that strikes out the most in Major League history.
So who did I miss? Chris Paddock's going against Oakland. So he's going to have Oakland this weekend and Oakland next week.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, but I guess we get a little sneak peek here if you're debating Chris Paddock for next week. I think Mitchell Parker and Chris Paddock are my favorite 2 here from Sunday.
I think that's fair.
All right, we're going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.